The recording begins with static. Then wind. Then something else, a sound like breathing, ragged and wet, caught between animal and something older. The audio quality is poor, recovered from a handheld device found half buried in red sand near the Nevada-Utah border in 2019. No one has claimed it. No one has asked for it back. What you're about to hear is that recording. What you're about to learn is what came after. But first, the running. Picture this, a moonlit expanse of sagebrush and silence, the kind of American desert that hasn't changed in 10,000 years. The Mojave breathes slowly out here, exhaling heat even after dark, holding secrets in every shadow between the Joshua trees. And across this ancient canvas, something is fleeing. He moves low to the ground, antlers catching starlight like bone-white branches torn from a dead tree. His fur is the color of drought, tan and dust gray, matted with blood along his left flank where a rifle round grazed him 40 minutes ago. Each leap costs him. Each breath is a negotiation with pain. Behind him, 3 sets of headlights cut through the darkness. Engines growl. Men shout coordinates into radios. Someone fires again, the crack splitting the night, and misses by inches. The jackalope doesn't look back. He never looks back. Looking back is how you die in the desert. His name, if creatures like him have names, has been forgotten by everyone except the wind. But for now, let's call him what the old Paiute elders called his kind, Whisper Walker. The one who speaks with stolen voices. The one who runs between worlds. He's been running for 300 years. Tonight, he's running out of time. The hunters are closer now. Their truck tires throw rooster tails of dust into the air, and their spotlights sweep the terrain like mechanical suns. They are not amateurs. They carry thermal scopes and GPS trackers and the kind of determination that only comes from believing you're chasing something worth millions. They're wrong about the millions. They're wrong about everything. But they'll learn. The desert always teaches its lessons the hard way. Another gunshot. Another miss. The jackalope crests a ridge and disappears into a dry wash, his antlers scraping stone as he squeezes through a gap no human could follow. And then, impossibly, a voice rises from the darkness ahead of him. It sounds like a woman. It sounds afraid. Please, the voice says. Help me. I'm hurt. Please. The hunters hear it too. Their trucks skid to a halt. Doors open. Boots hit dirt. Did you hear that? Someone's out here. Could be a hiker. Could be lost. They don't know. They can't know. People always joked that jackalopes could mimic human voices. It was part of the postcards, part of the tourist trap mythology, right next to the claim that they only mate during lightning storms. But no one expected him to beg for help. No one expected the voice to sound so human. No one expected it to work. Context. What the postcards never showed. Let me tell you what you think you know about jackalopes. You've seen them in gas stations along Route 66, those taxidermied rabbits with deer antlers glued to their skulls, posed in ridiculous positions, sold to tourists who want a piece of Americana to hang above their fireplaces. You've read the jokes on the postcards. Jackalope milk cures everything from arthritis to bad luck. To catch a jackalope, leave out whiskey, they're notorious drunks. Jackalopes can only be shot with bullets made of silver, gold, or expired credit cards. It's all very charming. Very American. The kind of folklore that exists purely to make people smile and spend $12 on something they'll forget about in a week. But here's the thing about legends, they don't survive for centuries by being entirely false. They survive by being mostly false, with a core of truth so strange, so uncomfortable, that we wrap it in jokes and taxidermy and gift shop kitsch just to make it bearable. The real jackalope is not a rabbit with antlers. The real jackalope is something much older. The earliest recorded sighting comes from a Spanish expedition journal dated 1542, almost 500 years ago. The entry is brief, written by a missionary named Father Sebastián de la Cruz, who was traveling through what is now southern Wyoming. He wrote, "Today we encountered a creature unlike any in God's creation. A hare, yes, but crowned with the horns of a young buck. It watched us from a distance, unafraid, and when Miguel approached, it spoke. It spoke in Miguel's voice. It said, 'Turn back. This land remembers.' We did not turn back. By morning, Miguel was dead. The physician says fever. I say something else. That journal is now housed in a private collection in Madrid. It has never been authenticated. But it has also never been disproven." Skip forward 200 years. The American frontier is expanding westward, and cowboys are encountering something in the high desert that defies explanation. They call it the Whispering Jack or the Voice Stealer. The stories are consistent across hundreds of miles: a rabbit-like creature with antlers that can perfectly mimic any sound it hears, human voices, coyote howls, the creak of wagon wheels, the cry of a dying man. Some cowboys believed the creature was a trickster spirit, sent to test travelers. Others believed it was a guardian of sacred places, warning intruders away from land that wasn't meant to be settled. A few, the ones who spent too long alone in the desert, believed it was something far worse. A surviving letter from a cattle driver named Ezekiel Marsh, written in 1867, contains this passage. "I heard my brother's voice calling from the canyon. I ran toward it, certain he'd fallen from his horse. But when I reached the source, I found only the creature, sitting on a rock, watching me with eyes that held more years than any beast should carry. It spoke again in Thomas's voice. It said, 'He's gone. They're all gone. But you can still leave.' I left. I never saw my brother's body. But I heard his voice 3 more times before I reached Fort Laramie. Always from a distance. Always telling me to go." These accounts don't appear in the history books. They don't appear on the postcards. But they appear in the margins, in letters, in journals, in the oral traditions of tribes who have lived in this land since before Europeans arrived. The Shoshone have a name for the creature, Wokovabai. It translates roughly to, the one who carries echoes. In their tradition, the jackalope is not a trickster or a monster. It is a keeper, a living vessel that holds the voices of the dead, carrying them through the desert until they can be properly released. The Navajo tell similar stories. So do the Paiute, the Ute, the Apache. The details vary, but the core remains: this creature is ancient, it is intelligent, and it is not meant to be hunted. But of course, in America, everything becomes a hunt eventually. The first, official, jackalope was created in 1932 by Douglas Herrick, a taxidermist in Douglas, Wyoming. He grafted deer antlers onto a jackrabbit carcass as a joke, and the image stuck. By 1940, Douglas had declared itself the jackalope capital of the world. By 1960, jackalope hunting licenses were being sold in gift shops across the region, valid only on June 31, a date that doesn't exist. The joke was everywhere. And somewhere in the desert, the real creature watched, and waited, and wondered if anyone would ever take him seriously again. If you've ever wondered why certain legends persist even when they seem ridiculous, this is why. Because the ridiculous version is easier to live with. Because the truth version keeps you awake at night, listening for voices that shouldn't exist, wondering if the sound of your mother calling your name from the next room is really her, or something else, something older, something that learned your mother's voice from a grief you forgot you carried. The hunters pursuing the jackalope tonight don't believe in the postcard version. They've done their research. They've read the journals. They've tracked the patterns. They know that every 7 years, roughly, someone goes missing in the high desert with no explanation. They know that in each case, witnesses report hearing the missing person's voice for days afterward, always from a distance, always leading deeper into the wilderness. They know that in 2012, a team of paranormal investigators set up recording equipment near a canyon in Nevada and captured 47 minutes of audio that contained voices belonging to people who had been dead for decades. The recording was never released. The team disbanded. 2 members are currently in psychiatric care. And they know, or believe they know, that the creature responsible for all of this is worth more alive than dead. Worth more to certain collectors, certain researchers, certain governments who have interests in things that shouldn't exist. So they hunt. And the jackalope runs. He's been running for so long now. 3 centuries of flight, of hiding, of watching humans spread across land that was never meant to hold them. He's seen railroads carve through sacred valleys. He's seen cities bloom in the desert like tumors made of concrete and neon. He's seen the sky fill with machines and the water turn bitter and the old places, the places he was meant to protect, vanish under parking lots and strip malls and monuments to forgetting. He carries all their voices, you know. Every human who died in the desert, every animal who perished in the heat, every whisper and scream and prayer that was swallowed by the silence. He carries them because someone has to. Because the land can't hold that much grief alone. It makes him heavy. It makes him tired. It makes him, sometimes, in moments of weakness, almost hope that the hunters will finally catch him. Almost. A coyote pack emerged from a canyon last week and circled him for 3 hours, waiting for him to collapse. He spoke to them in the voice of their dead alpha, and they fled. Survival isn't elegant. Survival is using whatever tool you have, even if the tool makes you hate yourself. If a rabbit with antlers can outrun professional hunters with thermal scopes and satellite tracking, maybe the universe still has a sense of humor. Or maybe the universe just doesn't want to hear what the jackalope would say if he finally stopped running. Either way, the chase continues. First sign of trouble. What the hunters found. The hunting party consisted of 4 men. The first was Marcus Webb, 53 years old, former wildlife control officer from Montana, now a private acquisition specialist for clients he never names. He's the one who found the tracks. The second was Daniel Crane, 41, ex-military, communications expert, carrying equipment worth more than most people's houses. He handles the audio surveillance. He's the one who first heard the voices. The third was Elijah Stone, 38, the money man, representing interests that prefer to remain anonymous. He doesn't do fieldwork often. But for this, for something that might actually be real, he made an exception. The fourth was Ray Delgado, 62, the oldest and quietest of the group. He grew up in this desert. His grandmother was Shoshone. He knows things the others don't. He's also the one who will survive. But we'll get to that. The trouble began 3 days before the chase. The team had set up a base camp near a ghost town called Meridian, which had been abandoned since 1931 after a silver mine collapse killed 47 workers. The town sits in a valley between 2 mesas, accessible only by a dirt road that hasn't been maintained in decades. It was the kind of place where cell phones don't work and GPS satellites seem confused, as if the land itself is trying to stay hidden. Marcus found the first tracks on the morning of day 2. Here, he said, kneeling in the red dust near an old well. You see this? The others gathered around. The print was unmistakable, rabbit-like, but larger than any jackrabbit native to the region, with a depth that suggested significant weight. And next to the rear paw prints, 2 parallel grooves in the sand, as if something had been dragged alongside. Antler marks. Could be a deer standing next to a rabbit burrow, Crane suggested. Could be, Marcus agreed. Except look at the spacing. The prints are connected. Same gait, same animal. This isn't 2 creatures. This is one. Elijah took photographs while Ray stood back, watching the horizon with an expression the others couldn't read. My grandmother told me a story, Ray said quietly. About this area specifically. She said there's a reason Meridian died. She said the miners dug too deep and woke something up. Something that had been sleeping since before the mountains had names. Your grandmother believed in fairy tales, Elijah replied, not unkindly. My grandmother lived to be 97 years old in a land that kills most people by 50. Maybe she knew things. The tracks led northeast, toward a series of canyons that cut through the mesa like wounds. The team followed them for 6 hours, losing the trail twice, finding it again in places that shouldn't have been accessible, cliff faces, dry riverbeds, the interior of an abandoned mine shaft that had been sealed since 1954. How did it get in there? Crane asked, shining his flashlight into the darkness. The entrance was boarded up. We had to pry the planks off. Maybe there's another way in, Marcus said. There's no other way in. I checked the geological surveys. Then maybe, Ray said softly, it doesn't move the way we think it moves. That night, the first strange thing happened. The team had set up camp in the ruins of Meridian's old church, 4 walls of adobe and a roof that was mostly intact. They'd established a perimeter of motion sensors and infrared cameras, standard protocol for any cryptid hunt. At 2:47 a.m., the sensors on the east side triggered. Crane reviewed the footage. It showed nothing. Just empty desert, moonlit and still. But the audio was different. On the recording, clear as a bell, a voice said, Daniel? Daniel, wake up. Something's wrong with the equipment. The voice belonged to Marcus Webb. Except Marcus Webb was asleep in his tent at that moment, 30 feet from the sensor, snoring loudly enough to be picked up on a separate microphone. Playback error, Elijah decided. Some kind of echo, maybe. Sound bouncing off the canyon walls. Sound doesn't bounce off canyon walls at 2 in the morning. In Marcus's exact voice saying words Marcus never said, Crane replied. His face was pale. I've been doing audio work for 15 years. This isn't an error. This is something mimicking human speech. Then we're on the right track, Marcus said, suddenly awake and listening. He didn't seem disturbed. He seemed excited. That's what it does, right? That's the whole point. It copies voices. We just got our first proof of life. Ray said nothing. He packed his bag quietly in the corner, and the others noticed he'd started wearing a small leather pouch around his neck, something his grandmother had given him years ago. Something he'd told them was just a good luck charm. It wasn't a good luck charm. The second day of tracking brought them to a ranch. Or what had been a ranch. The buildings were still standing, a main house, a barn, 2 outbuildings, but everything organic had been stripped away. No furniture. No tools. No indication that anyone had lived there in decades. The wooden structures had weathered to gray, and the windows were dark even in full daylight. This isn't on any map, Elijah said, checking his tablet. No property records, no tax assessments, nothing. As far as the county is concerned, this land is empty. As far as the county is concerned, this land doesn't exist, Marcus corrected. Look at the coordinates. We're in a gap. The property lines on either side don't meet. There's about 40 acres here that belong to no one. Inside the main house, they found the first artifact. It was a journal, leather-bound, the pages yellow and brittle with age. The handwriting was cramped and hurried, difficult to read in places, but certain passages were clear. April 3, 1889. The creature came again last night. I heard Sarah calling from the well, but Sarah has been dead for 2 years. I went anyway, God help me. I went because I wanted to hear her voice one more time. When I reached the well, there was nothing but the moon reflected in the black water. But the voice continued. It said, William. William, I forgive you. But you need to leave this place. You need to leave before the ground opens. April 17, 1889. I've seen it now. The creature. It sat on the fence post at dawn, watching me with eyes like river stones. It had antlers, small ones, like a young deer. And it had Sarah's voice still. It spoke to me for an hour. It told me things about the land, about what's underneath, about why the Shoshone never built here, about the doors that should stay closed. I don't know if I believe it. But I'm starting to pack. May 2, 1889. The entry is mostly illegible, water-damaged and torn. Only fragments remain, too late to leave, ground shaking, heard voices from below, hundreds of them, the creature tried to warn, should have listened. Sarah says it's okay now. Sarah says I can finally rest. There were no more entries after that. The journal had belonged to a man named William Marsh, a relative, perhaps, of the cattle driver Ezekiel Marsh whose letter I mentioned earlier. The Marsh family, it seemed, had a complicated relationship with this creature. This is incredible, Elijah breathed, photographing each page. This is primary source material. This could be worth. Put it back, Ray interrupted. Everyone turned to look at him. What? Put it back. That journal isn't ours to take. It was left here for a reason. Ray, we're here to find evidence. This is evidence. This is a warning. Ray's voice was flat, certain. That's what the creature does. It leaves warnings. It's been doing it for centuries. And you know what happens to people who ignore the warnings. Marcus laughed, but there was an edge to it. Are you seriously spooked by a moldy diary? Come on. We're scientists. Well, researchers. Well, professional hunters. The point is, we don't believe in curses. I never said anything about curses. Ray walked to the window and looked out at the desert. But I believe in patterns. And the pattern says, people who chase this creature don't come back the same. If they come back at all. That night, the motion sensors triggered 17 times between midnight and dawn. The footage showed nothing. The audio contained fragments of conversation in voices the equipment couldn't identify, a woman singing a lullaby, a child counting to 10, an old man reciting what sounded like a prayer in a language that predated English. And once, just once, a clear sentence in Ray's grandmother's voice. Grandson. Go home. This isn't your hunt. Ray heard it through his headphones and wept. The others pretended not to notice. The third day, they found the fence. It stretched across a dry riverbed at the entrance to a canyon, a barrier of old wood and rusted wire, clearly constructed decades ago, clearly maintained by someone. But there was a hole in the fence now, a section where the posts had been splintered and the wire torn away. Something with antlers had forced its way through. Fresh damage, Marcus observed, touching the broken wood. Within the last 48 hours. The edges haven't weathered yet. He's running, Crane said. Something spooked him, and he's running deeper into the canyon system. Or he's leading us somewhere, Ray countered. The creature isn't stupid. If it survived this long, it's not going to make mistakes. Maybe the fence wasn't meant to keep things out. Maybe it was meant to keep things in. You're really committed to this mystical guardian routine, aren't you? Elijah sounded tired. Look, I respect your heritage, but we're talking about an animal. A rare animal, maybe an unknown species, probably some kind of genetic mutation. It's not a spirit. It's not a warning. It's biology. Ray smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. Tell you what, he said. You keep believing it's biology. And when it speaks to you in the voice of someone you love, someone you lost, you tell me how that feels. You tell me if it feels like biology. They entered the canyon at noon. The walls rose around them like the ribs of some enormous beast, red rock streaked with black where water had carved its path over millennia. The temperature dropped as the sunlight faded to a thin strip far above. Sound behaved strangely here, footsteps echoed too long, whispers carried farther than they should, and sometimes, if you listened carefully, you could hear voices from somewhere deeper. Maybe the coyote pack had finally learned carpentry, as the jackalope had once hoped. Maybe they'd built these walls themselves, one stone at a time, just to see the look on everyone's face. He would have laughed at that, if laughing didn't hurt so much. The jackalope watched them from a ledge 200 feet above, invisible against the rock, his wound throbbing with each heartbeat. He'd led them here on purpose, yes. Ray's grandmother was right, this wasn't the hunter's hunt. This was his. And they were almost where he needed them to be. Building the mystery. What the desert remembered. The canyon opened into a valley that shouldn't have existed. All four men stopped at the entrance, staring at a landscape that contradicted everything they thought they knew about the region. Green grass grew in patches around a spring-fed pool. Cottonwood trees provided shade. The air was cooler here, almost pleasant, carrying a scent of sage and something else, something older, like the smell of rain on ancient stone. "This isn't possible," Crane said, checking his equipment. "We're in the middle of a desert. Average rainfall is 4 inches a year. Where is this water coming from?" "Underground aquifer," Marcus suggested, but he didn't sound convinced. "No." Elijah was consulting geological surveys on his tablet. "There's no aquifer here. There's nothing here. According to every piece of data I have, we're standing in an empty canyon at the bottom of a dry riverbed. This valley doesn't exist." "And yet," Ray said quietly, "here we are." They made camp near the pool as the sun began to set. The light changed the valley's appearance, shadows deepened, colors shifted, and the rock formations around the perimeter began to look less like natural erosion and more like something else. Statues, maybe. Or sentinels. Shapes that had been carved with purpose by hands that had never been human. That night, they found the second artifact. Crane was setting up audio monitoring equipment near the tree line when his boot struck something metal. He dug carefully, brushing away soil and debris, and unearthed a tin box approximately 8 inches square. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that had somehow remained intact, was a collection of items that defied easy explanation. A map, hand-drawn on leather, showing a network of tunnels beneath the valley. The tunnels converged at a central point marked with a symbol that none of them recognized, a circle with antlers, or perhaps a sun with branches, or perhaps something else entirely. A series of photographs, daguerreotypes from the late 1800s, showing men and women in period clothing standing around what appeared to be a hole in the ground. Their faces were solemn. One photograph showed a woman holding something small and antlered in her arms, like a mother holding a child. And a letter, dated June 1903, written in a feminine hand. "To whoever finds this record. We were wrong to think we could possess it. We were wrong to think its purpose was ours to decide. The creature belongs to this land, and the land belongs to something older still. We came here seeking treasure, the Spanish called it El Corazón del Desierto, the heart of the desert, and we believed it was gold or silver or something we could sell. It isn't gold. It isn't silver. It's a door. The creature guards the door. It has guarded it since before my grandmother's grandmother was born. It uses voices to warn people away, and when warnings fail, it uses other methods. We lost 7 men before we understood. We lost 3 more before we stopped digging. I am the last of our expedition. I am leaving these records so that others might learn from our failure. The creature is not our enemy. The creature is the only thing standing between our world and whatever waits on the other side of that door. Do not dig. Do not hunt. Do not open what was closed for good reason. The creature's wound is our fault. It will never fully heal. But it still protects us, even now, even after everything we did. Go home. For the love of all you hold sacred, go home. Elena Marsh. Another Marsh. The family connection was undeniable now. A door, Elijah repeated, reading over Crane's shoulder. A door to what? Nothing good, Ray answered. He hadn't read the letter, but he'd seen the symbol on the map. His grandmother had drawn that same symbol for him once, when he was 7 years old, and told him that if he ever saw it in the real world, he should run and never look back. He hadn't run. He was here, standing in a valley that didn't exist, holding a map to something that should never be opened. He wondered if his grandmother could see him now. He wondered if she was disappointed. We need to follow this, Marcus decided. These tunnels, if they're real, if there's actually something down there, this changes everything. We're not just hunting an animal. We're investigating an archaeological site. A potentially significant archaeological site. Did you miss the part about whatever waits on the other side of that door? Crane asked. Because that sounds pretty ominous. It's 1903. They were superstitious. They saw something they couldn't explain and attributed it to supernatural forces. That's what people did back then. Marcus was already gathering equipment. We have technology they couldn't have imagined. We have thermal imaging and ground-penetrating radar and enough firepower to handle anything biological. Whatever's down there, we can document it, study it, and get out safely. And if it's not biological? Ray asked. Then we make scientific history. Either way, we're going down. The entrance to the tunnel system was hidden behind a rock formation at the valley's northern edge. It had been sealed at some point, traces of mortar were still visible around the edges, but time and erosion had created a gap just wide enough for a man to squeeze through. Or something smaller than a man. Something that could navigate spaces humans couldn't follow. Inside, the air was cold and still, carrying a scent that reminded Marcus of the time he'd explored a cenote in the Yucatan, mineral water and ancient stone and something organic, something that had been growing in darkness for longer than anyone could measure. Their flashlights illuminated walls covered in petroglyphs. Some were clearly Native American in origin, hunting scenes, celestial observations, the familiar iconography of southwestern indigenous art. But others were different. Older. They showed shapes that didn't match any known human tradition, figures that might have been animals or might have been something else, and recurring images of a small antlered creature positioned between two worlds. He's everywhere, Crane whispered, photographing the walls. Look, there, and there, and there. Dozens of representations across what looks like thousands of years of continuous use. Whatever this thing is, people have been documenting it since the first humans arrived in this region. Or before, Ray added. Some of these markings, they're not human. The perspective is wrong. The scale is wrong. It's like they were drawn by something that didn't see the world the way we do. They descended. The tunnels branched and converged according to the map's pattern, leading ever deeper into the earth. The temperature continued to drop. The walls grew smoother, as if polished by countless passages of something soft, fur, perhaps, or fabric, or flesh. And then they began to hear the voices. At first, it sounded like wind, a low murmur echoing from somewhere ahead. But as they moved closer, the sounds resolved into words. Languages they didn't recognize. Conversations they couldn't follow. And occasionally, heartbreakingly clearly, voices they knew. Crane heard his mother, who had died of cancer 6 years ago. She was telling him not to be afraid of the dark. Marcus heard his first wife, who had left him in 2008. She was apologizing for things she'd never apologized for in life. Elijah heard his business partner, who had committed suicide after their company failed in the 2008 recession. He was explaining why he'd done it, finally, after all these years. And Ray heard his grandmother. She was not apologizing. She was not explaining. She was singing, softly, a song she'd sung to him as a child, a song in the old language that he'd almost forgotten. He stopped walking. Tears streamed down his face. It's not real, Marcus said, his own voice unsteady. It's the creature. It's mimicking voices. It's trying to manipulate us. Is it? Ray asked. Or is it trying to show us something? Show us what? That the dead aren't gone. That their voices are still here, carried by something that loved them enough to remember. Maybe that's what it does. Maybe that's all it's ever done. Not trick us. Not hurt us. Just remember. The third artifact was waiting in the central chamber. The space was enormous, a natural cavern that had been expanded and shaped by unknown hands into something almost architectural. Columns of rock supported a ceiling lost in darkness. The floor was smooth and marked with the same symbol from the map, rendered in some substance that still faintly glowed after untold centuries. And in the center of the chamber, surrounded by objects that looked almost like offerings, feathers, bones, beads, coins from a dozen different eras, was a tape recorder. It was a Sony model from the 1980s. It should not have been working. It should not have been here at all. But when Marcus pressed play, the speakers crackled to life. The recording was just over 3 minutes long. It contained a single voice, male, middle-aged, with the flat accent of someone from the rural Midwest. My name is Harold Marsh. I'm recording this in March of 1987. I'm the last of my family to come here, and I pray to God I'm the last one who ever will. The creature found me 3 days ago. It led me here, through the valley, through the tunnels, to this chamber. It wanted me to see this place. It wanted me to understand. I understand now. The door isn't metaphorical. It's real. It's beneath us, right now, under the floor of this cavern. And the creature, the jackalope, if you want to use that ridiculous name, it's the lock. Its presence here is what keeps the door shut. As long as it lives, as long as it stays in this region, whatever's on the other side can't get through. But it's dying. We did that. My family. The Marshes. We've been hunting this thing for 4 generations, and we finally wounded it badly enough that it can't fully heal. And now it's weakening, year by year, and the door is opening, just a little, just enough for whispers to come through. The voices everyone hears? Some of them are the creature, yes. But some of them aren't. Some of them are coming from the other side. And they're getting louder. I'm leaving this tape as a warning. Stop hunting it. Stop chasing it. Let it rest. Let it heal. Because if it dies, if we finally succeed in killing the one thing that stands between us and whatever's down there, we won't have to go looking for monsters anymore. The monsters will come looking for us. The tape ended. Static filled the chamber. And somewhere, deep below the floor, something stirred. Climax. The truth beneath. They felt it before they heard it, a vibration in the stone, a resonance that seemed to pass through their bodies and settle somewhere behind their eyes. The glowing symbol on the floor pulsed once, twice, 3 times, and then the darkness around them began to move. We need to leave, Ray said. His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking. Right now. We need to leave right now. We can't. Elijah was staring at the floor, at the symbol, at something only he could see. We're so close. Whatever's down there, whatever Harold Marsh was talking about, we could be the first humans in history to document it. To prove it exists. Some things don't want to be proven, Ray replied. Some things exist specifically because no one believes in them. That's the deal. That's always been the deal. You leave them alone, they leave you alone. You start digging, start recording, start trying to drag them into the light. Then what? Then they stop hiding. The floor cracked. Not dramatically, not the catastrophic rupture of an earthquake or an explosion. Just a single thin line, running from the edge of the symbol to a point directly beneath Elijah's feet. A whisper of dust rose from the crack, and with it came a smell that none of them could identify. It was cold, that smell. Cold and old and hungry. And then the jackalope appeared. He emerged from a shadow that shouldn't have been deep enough to hide anything, one moment empty darkness, the next a small form with matted fur and bone-white antlers and eyes that held more sorrow than any creature should be able to carry. He was smaller than they'd expected. Smaller and older and more broken. The wound on his flank was visible now, a scar that had never fully closed, weeping something that wasn't quite blood. He moved with the careful deliberation of the very old, each step a negotiation with pain. But his eyes were ancient. His eyes had seen empires rise and fall. His eyes had watched the first humans cross the land bridge from Asia. His eyes had witnessed the birth of mountains and the death of seas. He looked at each of them in turn, and when his gaze met Ray's, something passed between them, recognition, perhaps, or understanding, or the acknowledgement of a debt that had been owed for a very long time. Then he spoke. His voice was not his own. It couldn't be, he was a rabbit, more or less, and rabbits don't have the vocal apparatus for human speech. But the words came anyway, carried on air that shouldn't have been able to carry them, in a voice that sounded like all voices and no voice, like wind through canyon walls, like water over stone. "You want to know the truth," he said. "So I will tell you the truth. And then you will choose." Marcus raised his rifle. The jackalope didn't flinch. "That won't help you," he continued. "Bullets can wound me, yes. Your ancestors proved that. But you can't kill what I am. You can only make me weaker. And every time I weaken, the door opens a little more." "What door?" Elijah demanded. "What's actually down there? Something that existed before your species learned to walk upright. Something that was old when the dinosaurs were young. Something that came to this world from somewhere else, somewhere outside, somewhere between, somewhere that doesn't have a name in any language you could pronounce." The jackalope limped forward, and with each step, the crack in the floor widened slightly. When the first peoples came to this land, they found it already here. Already waiting. It had been waiting for millions of years, patient as stone, hungry as void. It whispered to them in their dreams. It offered them power, knowledge, immortality. Some listened. Those were the ones who disappeared. He stopped at the edge of the symbol, looking down at the faint glow. The ones who survived were the ones who learned to say no. They built this place, this chamber, this seal, this lock. And they created me. Or found me. Or called me from somewhere else. I don't remember anymore. It was so long ago. All I remember is the purpose: guard the door. Keep it closed. No matter what. For how long? Crane asked. His camera was recording, but his hands had stopped shaking. Something in the jackalope's voice demanded stillness. Forever. That was the deal. That's always been the deal. I stay here. I watch. I warn. And when warning doesn't work. He turned to look directly at the crack in the floor. I do what I have to do. But you're wounded, Ray said softly. You've been wounded for over a century. The recordings, the journals, they all mention it. The Marsh family hurt you, and you've never fully recovered. No. I haven't. Can you heal? Is there anything that could help you heal? The jackalope was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, smaller somehow, more vulnerable, more like the voice of a creature that had been carrying an impossible burden for longer than anyone should have to. There was a time when the people here helped me. They brought offerings. They sang songs. They remembered why the door needed to stay closed, and their remembering gave me strength. But then the new people came, your people, the ones with guns and fences and a hunger for everything they saw. They forgot the old ways. They forgot why certain places should be left alone. And every generation, they forgot a little more. He looked at Ray. Your grandmother remembered. She tried to teach you. But you came here anyway. I came here to stop them, Ray said. I came here because I knew they would find this place eventually, and I thought maybe I could. Protect me? The word hung in the air. The last person who tried to protect me died in 1954. His name was Thomas Marsh. He was 17 years old. He'd read his family's journals and decided that 4 generations of hunting was enough. He came here alone, in the middle of winter, carrying nothing but a blanket and some food. He was going to stand guard. He was going to make sure no one else ever hurt me. The jackalope's voice cracked. He froze to death on the 3rd night. I found him in the morning, curled up against a rock, smiling. He'd heard his mother's voice in the wind, and he'd followed it until his body couldn't follow anymore. That was you, Marcus said. You mimicked his mother's voice. You lured him to his death. No. The word was sharp, absolute. I don't lure anyone to death. I never have. What Thomas heard, what you all heard in the tunnels, those aren't tricks. Those aren't manipulations. They're memories. The voices of everyone who ever died in this desert, everyone who was ever lost, everyone who was ever forgotten. I carry them because someone has to. Because if no one remembers the dead, they truly cease to exist. He looked at Marcus with something that might have been pity. Your grandmother is among them, Marcus Webb. She died in 1978, in a hospital in Billings, Montana. Her last words were, "Tell my grandson I'm proud of him." No one told you. The nurses were changing shifts. The message was lost. Until now. Marcus lowered his rifle. His face had gone pale. And you, the jackalope continued, turning to Crane. Your mother didn't just say not to be afraid of the dark. She said, Danny, the dark is where the stars live. Don't be afraid of it. Be amazed by it. She wanted you to look up instead of down. She wanted you to wonder instead of fear. Crane made a sound that wasn't quite a sob. And Elijah Stone. The jackalope's voice softened. Your partner didn't commit suicide because the company failed. He committed suicide because he was sick, really, truly sick, in a way that had nothing to do with business. He left you a letter explaining everything. It's still in his desk drawer, in storage unit 47 in Portland. He sealed it himself. He was too ashamed to send it while alive, too hopeful that you'd find it after. Elijah sat down heavily on the chamber floor. His hands were trembling. Why are you telling us this? Ray asked. Why now? The jackalope turned to face him fully, and in those ancient eyes, Ray saw something he hadn't expected, peace. Because it's almost over, the jackalope said. Because I've been running and guarding and carrying voices for 300 years, longer, if you count the time before I understood what I was, and I'm tired. The wound won't heal. The door won't stay closed forever. And when it finally opens, someone needs to know the truth. What truth? That I'm not the last defense. I'm just the first. There are others like me, scattered across this continent, each one guarding a door of their own. The thunderbirds in the north. The Wendigo, the real one, not the monster from your stories, but the keeper. The serpents in the deep lakes. The old woman who walks the Appalachian trails. We're all that stands between your world and what waits beyond. He looked toward the crack in the floor, which had widened now to the width of a human hand. Something was moving in the darkness below, not visible, not audible, but present. Pressing. Waiting. The people who created us are gone. The songs that sustained us have been forgotten. One by one, we're fading. And when the last of us falls, the doors will open. All of them. At once. How do we stop it? Ray stepped forward. There must be a way. If people created you, if songs sustained you, we can learn. We can remember. We can. You can try. The jackalope's voice was gentle now, almost kind. But that's not why I brought you here. He turned and began to walk toward the crack, each step slow and deliberate. I brought you here because tonight, the door opens whether I want it to or not. The wound is too deep. The forgetting has gone too far. Something is coming through, and I can't stop it alone. Then what can we do? The jackalope stopped at the very edge of the crack. Below, in the absolute darkness, something vast shifted its attention upward. The temperature in the chamber dropped 20 degrees in an instant. You can witness, he said. You can survive. And you can tell the story. He looked back at them one final time, for humans who had come to hunt him, for humans who had instead found something they never expected, the truth. Funny, he said, and for just a moment, his voice held a trace of something that might have been humor. Humans always chase legends. But legends rarely chase back. Then he jumped into the crack. The darkness swallowed him. The chamber shook. The glowing symbol flared bright enough to blind, and somewhere far below, a sound began, a sound like a door slamming shut, like a key turning in a lock, like a voice saying no to something that had been waiting to say yes for a very, very long time. When the light faded and the shaking stopped, the crack was gone. The floor was smooth and unmarked, as if nothing had ever disturbed it. And the jackalope was nowhere to be seen. Resolution. What the hunters became. They didn't speak for a long time. The four of them sat in that chamber beneath the earth, surrounded by offerings from civilizations that no longer existed, listening to the silence where voices had been. Marcus was the first to move. He walked to the center of the floor, to the place where the symbol had glowed, where the crack had opened, where the jackalope had made his final stand, and knelt down. He placed his palm flat against the stone. It's warm, he said quietly. The stone is warm. He's still down there. Ray's voice was certain. Whatever he did, sealing the door, pushing back whatever was coming through, it's not over. It's never over. It just continues. For how long? For as long as he can. For as long as anyone remembers. Elijah stood up slowly, wiping his face with the back of his hand. He looked older than he had that morning, not physically, but in some deeper way, as if the weight of what he'd witnessed had settled into his bones. What do we do now? He asked. We came here to capture a creature worth millions. We found this. What do we tell people? What do we tell our clients? We tell them nothing, Crane answered. He was reviewing the footage on his camera, scrolling through hours of recording. We tell them we failed. We tell them the jackalope is a myth after all, just another piece of roadside Americana, just another joke on a postcard. We tell them to stop looking. They won't believe us. No. They won't. But maybe we can make them believe enough to stay away from this place. Maybe we can buy him some time. Ray walked to the edge of the chamber, to the entrance of the tunnel that would lead them back to the surface. He paused there, one hand on the stone wall, listening to something the others couldn't hear. My grandmother used to say that the best thing you can do for a sacred place is forget where it is, he said. Not forget that it exists, that's how you end up with parking lots on burial grounds. But forget the specific location. Let the maps be wrong. Let the GPS be confused. Let the desert keep its secrets. Can we do that? Just forget? We can try. Ray turned back to face them. We can lose the coordinates. Destroy the recordings. Bury the artifacts. And when people ask us what we found out here, we can tell them the truth. We found a rabbit with antlers. It ran away. End of story. Marcus laughed, a short, broken sound. No one's going to believe that. No one believed the real story either. That's the whole point. The jackalope survives because he's ridiculous. Because people would rather buy a stuffed rabbit with glued-on antlers than accept that something ancient and powerful and utterly beyond their understanding is living in their backyard. He smiled, and it was the first genuine smile any of them had seen since they'd entered the valley. The best camouflage in the world isn't being invisible. It's being a joke. It's being so absurd that no one takes you seriously. He figured that out centuries ago. We just have to help him keep the act going. They left the chamber as the sun was rising, climbing through tunnels that seemed shorter than before, emerging into a valley that already looked different, greener, somehow, more alive, as if something beneath the surface had finally relaxed. The pool was still there. The cottonwood trees were still there. But the entrance to the tunnel system had sealed itself behind them, leaving nothing but solid rock where the gap had been. Convenient, Elijah muttered. Intentional, Ray corrected. He doesn't want anyone else coming down here. He doesn't want anyone else to know. They hiked back through the canyon, past the broken fence that had mysteriously repaired itself overnight, past the abandoned ranch where William Marsh's journal had somehow vanished from the table where they'd left it, past the ghost town of Meridian where their base camp sat undisturbed. By the time they reached their vehicles, it was midday. The desert stretched around them in all directions, silent and golden and utterly ordinary. So that's it, Crane said, loading equipment into his truck. We just go home. We just go home. Marcus climbed into the driver's seat of his own vehicle. And we spend the rest of our lives knowing what we know and saying nothing about it. Can you do that? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I can try, he said finally. For him. For whatever he's down there doing right now, holding back something that should never see the light of day. I can try. They drove away in separate directions, Marcus north toward Montana, Crane west toward California, Elijah south toward Phoenix. None of them looked back. Looking back is how you die in the desert. Ray drove last. Before he left, he walked 100 yards into the scrubland, to a spot where the sagebrush grew thick and the wind carried whispers of things that might have been voices. He knelt down and placed his grandmother's leather pouch in the sand, the one she'd given him years ago, the one that wasn't a good luck charm. For him, he said quietly. From all of us who still remember. The wind picked up. The pouch trembled slightly, as if something had touched it. And then, so softly that Ray almost thought he'd imagined it, a voice spoke from somewhere behind him. Thank you. It was his grandmother's voice. But this time, he knew it wasn't mimicry. This time, it was something else. Epilogue. What the desert kept. In the years that followed, certain things changed in the high desert of the American Southwest. The ghost town of Meridian, which had stood abandoned for nearly a century, was quietly purchased by an anonymous buyer and demolished. The land was returned to the Bureau of Land Management with a deed restriction that prohibited any development, excavation, or extended visitation in perpetuity. The paperwork was filed incorrectly, and within months, the parcel had been absorbed into a wilderness area that no one could quite remember establishing. The canyon system that the hunters had explored was listed as dangerous on federal maps, prone to flash floods, unstable rock formations, possible contamination from historical mining operations. Warning signs were posted at every entrance. Hikers who ignored them reported getting lost within minutes, their GPS devices malfunctioning, their compasses spinning uselessly. Most gave up and turned back. The few who pressed on found nothing but empty rock and endless dead ends. The valley at the heart of the canyon was never mentioned in any official document. It appeared on no maps, in no satellite imagery, in no geological surveys. As far as the modern world was concerned, it didn't exist. And maybe it didn't. Maybe it never had. Maybe the whole thing was just a story, the kind of story that people tell around campfires, the kind that grows with each retelling, the kind that eventually becomes so distorted that no one remembers what was true and what was invented. That's what most people believe, anyway. That's the comfortable version. But in certain circles, among researchers who study folklore, among indigenous elders who still remember the old ways, among hunters who've spent their lives tracking things that shouldn't exist, there are whispers of something else. They say the jackalope still runs through the desert on moonless nights, his antlers catching starlight, his wounds slowly, impossibly healing. They say he still mimics voices, but differently now, not to warn or frighten, but to comfort. Travelers who've lost their way have reported hearing loved ones calling them toward safety. Hikers on the verge of heatstroke have heard children laughing, leading them to hidden springs. Desperate people, standing on the edge of choices they couldn't take back, have heard their mothers, their fathers, their friends, saying exactly what they needed to hear. They say he's not alone anymore either. That somehow, through some mechanism no one can explain, others have joined him, guardians called from other places, keepers awakened from long slumber, spirits drawn to a land that finally remembered how to ask for help. The door beneath the desert is still closed. Whatever waits on the other side is still waiting. But the lock is stronger now. The forgetting has slowed. And somewhere in the vast American wilderness, a small creature with antlers and ancient eyes is still doing what he was created to do, watching, warning, remembering. Marcus Webb retired from hunting the following year. He now runs a wildlife rehabilitation center in Montana, specializing in injured rabbits and hares. His colleagues think it's a strange specialty for a man with his background. He's never explained. Daniel Crane destroyed all his recording equipment and became an elementary school music teacher. He teaches children songs from cultures all over the world, including several that he learned from recordings he shouldn't have kept. Some of those songs are very, very old. Some of them are about creatures with antlers. The children love them. Elijah Stone found his partner's letter, exactly where the jackalope had said it would be. He read it 17 times before he was able to put it down. Then he closed his business, donated his wealth to mental health foundations, and disappeared into a monastery in New Mexico that doesn't appear on any map. Some say he's still there, praying for things he's never named. And Ray Delgado went home to his reservation and sat with the elders, and told them everything. They listened without interrupting. When he finished, they were silent for a long time. Then the oldest among them, a woman named Mary whose grandmother had known Ray's grandmother, reached out and took his hand. "So he's still there," she said. "He's still there. Good." She smiled, and her smile was sad and proud and relieved all at once. "Then we still have time." That night, for the first time in decades, the elders built a fire and sang the old songs. They sang about the land and the sky and the creatures that moved between them. They sang about doors that should stay closed and guardians who never rest. They sang about a small thing with antlers who had given everything to protect a world that had mostly forgotten him. The songs carried on the wind, drifting across miles of desert, echoing through canyons and valleys and hidden places. And somewhere in the darkness, something heard them. Something that had been alone for a very long time. Something that, just for a moment, didn't feel quite so tired anymore. The desert keeps its secrets well. That's what the old-timers say, the ones who've lived their whole lives in the shadow of mesas and the silence of sagebrush plains. The desert doesn't forget, but it doesn't tell either. It just holds on, patient as stone, waiting for the rare soul who knows how to listen. If you ever find yourself driving through the American Southwest, through Nevada or Utah or the forgotten corners of Wyoming, and you see something small and antlered dash across the road in your headlights, don't chase it. Don't stop. Don't even slow down. Just keep driving, and when you're safely home, pour yourself a drink and raise a glass to the darkness. Because out there, somewhere in the vast and empty night, something is running that has been running since before your grandparents were born. Something is guarding a door that should never be opened. Something is carrying the voices of the dead, so that they never truly die. And if you listen closely, if you really, truly listen, on nights when the wind is still and the stars are bright, you might just hear him. The jackalope. The voice stealer. The last, best lock on a door that the world forgot was there. He's still out there. He's still running. And legends, as it turns out, never really end. They just wait for someone brave enough to tell them true. The last known photograph of the creature was taken in 2019 by a hiker near the Nevada-Utah border. It shows a blurred shape against a sunset sky, something small and fast with what might be antlers, caught mid-leap, already vanishing into the golden light. The photographer reported hearing someone call her name moments before she took the picture. She was alone at the time. She still carries that photo in her wallet, next to pictures of her children and her wedding day. When people ask her why, she just smiles. Because, she says, some things are worth remembering. Even if no one believes they're true. Especially if no one believes they're true. End.